Hello, this is Patient X Files, where the rare becomes real, the invisible prison. I never told anyone this before, but I killed my daughter the moment I kissed her forehead. Not with poison, not with violence, with love. The most dangerous thing in the world for Emma wasn't a bullet or a blade, it was my lips touching her skin. One kiss, one breath. One moment of being a normal mother, and I could have murdered the child I'd waited 9 months to hold. You think you know what isolation means? You think quarantine during the pandemic was hard? Let me tell you about Emma Rodriguez, the girl who was born into a prison made of love, where every hug could kill her, where the very air you breathe is her enemy. Emma came into this world on a Tuesday morning in March, screaming like any healthy baby. But within hours, the doctors knew something was catastrophically wrong. Her blood work revealed the nightmare every parent dreads hearing. Severe Combined Immunodeficiency, SCID, the bubble boy disease. A condition so rare that only about 1 in 100,000 babies are born with it. But Emma wasn't just any SCID patient. She had the most severe form. Her body produced 0 functioning immune cells. 0. Imagine a fortress with no walls, no guards, no defenses. That was Emma's body. Every bacteria, every virus, every microscopic invader that your body fights off without you even knowing it could kill her in hours. The doctors explained it to us like this. Your daughter's immune system doesn't exist. She's like a computer with no antivirus software in a world full of digital viruses. One infection, and it's game over. I remember staring at this perfect, beautiful baby through the thick plastic walls of her sterile isolette, watching her tiny fingers curl and uncurl, completely unaware that the world outside was trying to murder her with every breath. Dr. Martinez, the immunologist, pulled my husband Carlos and me aside. His face was grim. I need you to understand something. Emma cannot leave this sterile environment. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. One common cold virus that wouldn't even make you sniffle could kill her within 48 hours. Carlos broke down. I didn't. I couldn't. Someone had to stay strong to ask the questions that would determine if our daughter lived or died. What are her options? I whispered. Bone marrow transplant. It's her only real chance at a normal life. But we need a perfect match, and even then there's a 30% chance she won't survive the procedure. 30% chance of death. 70% chance of maybe, possibly living a normal life. Those weren't odds. That was Russian roulette with my daughter's life as the stakes. But here's what they didn't tell us in that sterile conference room surrounded by medical textbooks and charts. They didn't tell us about the psychological torture that was coming. They didn't explain that we were about to become prisoners too, locked in a medical nightmare that would redefine everything we thought we knew about being parents. Emma's room became our world. A 12 by 12-foot sterile chamber with positive air pressure, filtered air, and walls that might as well have been made of diamond for how impenetrable they were. Everything that entered had to be sterilized. Her toys, her clothes, her food, even the books we read to her through the intercom system. I had to gown up every time I wanted to hold my daughter. Full medical scrubs, gloves, mask, hairnet. I looked like a surgeon preparing for a complex operation, when all I wanted to do was kiss my baby's forehead like any normal mother. The isolation wasn't just physical. It was emotional, psychological, spiritual. How do you explain to a 6-month-old why mommy can only touch her through thick rubber gloves? How do you maintain any sense of normal parent-child bonding when every interaction is mediated by plastic barriers and medical protocols? But Emma was a fighter. Even as an infant, she had this spark in her eyes, this defiant little spirit that seemed to say, I don't care what the world thinks is impossible. I'm going to live anyway. She learned to walk by pulling herself up on the edges of her sterile crib. She learned to talk by listening to us through the intercom. By age 2, she could name every piece of medical equipment in her room. Ventilator, she'd say, pointing with a chubby finger. Air filter, monitor. Other kids her age were learning about cats and dogs. Emma was learning about white blood cell counts and infection protocols. The hardest part wasn't the medical procedures or the constant fear. It was watching her watch other children through the window of her room. The children's hospital had a playground visible from Emma's window, and she would press her face against the glass, watching kids run and play and do all the normal things she couldn't do. Mama, she asked me one day when she was 3, why do those kids get to go outside and I don't? How do you answer that question? How do you explain to a 3-year-old that the world is literally trying to kill her, that the air itself is poison to her body? I tried to make it a game. Remember how we talked about your special room? It's like a castle, and you're the princess, and all the doctors and nurses are your knights protecting you from the invisible dragons outside. She looked at me with those impossibly wise eyes. But Mama, even princesses get to leave their castles sometimes. That night I cried until I had no tears left. The months turned into years. Emma's 4th birthday, 5th birthday, 6th birthday, all celebrated in that sterile room. We tried to make each one special, decorating as much as the sterile environment would allow, bringing in specially sterilized toys and books. But I could see it wearing on her. The isolation was changing her personality. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped asking about the children in the playground. She stopped asking when she could go home. That's when I realized we were losing her. Not to infection, not to medical complications, but to despair. We were so focused on keeping her body alive that we were letting her spirit die. The breakthrough came when Emma was 7 years old. Dr. Martinez burst into our room with news that changed everything. They had found a bone marrow match. Not just any match, but a perfect genetic twin from the donor registry. A 19-year-old college student from Oregon who had signed up to donate on a whim during a campus blood drive. This is it, Doctor, Martinez said, his voice shaking with excitement. This is Emma's chance. But the procedure was terrifying. They would have to completely destroy what little immune system Emma had with chemotherapy and radiation, leaving her even more vulnerable than before. Then they would transplant the new bone marrow and pray that it would engraft and start producing healthy immune cells. For 2 weeks, Emma would be more vulnerable than she had ever been. One infection during that period and we would lose her. It's like tearing down your house to rebuild it, Dr. Martinez explained. For a while, you have no protection at all. But if it works, you end up with something stronger than what you had before. Carlos and I agonized over the decision. Emma, at 7 years old, made it for us. I want to try, Mama. I want to go to the playground. The days before the transplant were surreal. We knew that in a matter of weeks, Emma would either be free or dead. There was no middle ground, no partial success, no maybe. The chemotherapy was brutal. Watching your child go through cancer treatment when they don't have cancer is a special kind of hell. Emma's hair fell out. She threw up constantly. Her tiny body seemed to shrink before our eyes, but her spirit grew stronger every day. I'm like a snake, Mama, she told me as we watched her hair fall out in clumps. I'm shedding my old skin so I can grow a new one. The transplant itself was surprisingly anticlimactic. After years of buildup, it was just a bag of blood-like fluid dripping through an IV into Emma's arm. It looked like strawberry milk. This ordinary-looking liquid that contained someone else's stem cells, someone else's immune system, someone else's chance at life. We held our breath for weeks. Every day the doctors drew blood looking for signs that the new bone marrow was working, that Emma's body was accepting this foreign gift and starting to produce her own immune cells for the first time in her life. Day 10 post-transplant, nothing. Day 15, still nothing. Day 20. A few white blood cells appeared, but not enough to matter. I started planning Emma's funeral in my head. I couldn't help it. 7 years of medical trauma had taught me to expect the worst. Then, on day 23, Dr. Martinez practically ran into our room. "It's working," he gasped. "The engraftment is working. Emma's producing white blood cells, real ones, functioning ones." I don't remember what happened next. Carlos says I fainted. Emma says I cried. All I remember is this overwhelming sense that we had been holding our breath for 7 years and we could finally exhale. But the real miracle happened 3 months later. Dr. Martinez walked into Emma's room without a gown, without gloves, without a mask. Just Dr. Martinez breathing regular hospital air with all its bacteria and viruses and microscopic threats. He sat down on Emma's bed. Her actual bed, not separated by plastic barriers. "Hello, Emma," he said and reached out to shake her hand. Skin-to-skin contact. The first time in her life that Emma had touched another human being without barriers, without protection, without fear. She stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, then looked at me. "Is it safe, Mama?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Emma reached out and shook Dr. Martinez's hand. Then she giggled. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. 2 weeks later, we walked out of the hospital. Actually walked out. No wheelchair, no special transport, no isolation protocols. Emma carried a small backpack with her few possessions, and we walked through the front door of the hospital like any normal family. The first thing Emma did was run to the playground. She was 8 years old and had never felt grass under her feet, never breathed outdoor air, never felt the wind in her hair. She stood at the edge of the playground for a long moment, just staring. Then she took off running, her arms spread wide like she was trying to hug the entire world. Other kids came over to play with her. Normal kids with their normal germs and their normal childhood illnesses that used to be death sentences for Emma. She played tag and went down the slide and climbed on the monkey bars like she had been doing it her whole life. I sat on a bench and watched my daughter play, really play for the first time. A mother behind me was complaining that her kid had a runny nose and she hoped he wouldn't catch anything at the playground. I wanted to tell her that runny noses were miracles, that the ability to fight off a simple cold was a superpower that most people take for granted, that her son's stuffy nose represented an immune system doing exactly what it was supposed to do, an immune system that my daughter would have died for. But I just smiled and watched Emma discover what it meant to be a normal kid. That was 5 years ago. Emma is 13 now, in 8th grade, playing soccer and complaining about homework and developing crushes on boys just like any normal teenager. She has scars from all the medical procedures and she still has to go in for regular checkups to make sure her transplanted immune system is working properly. But she's alive, she's free, she's normal. Last month she asked if she could get her ears pierced. A year ago, I would have panicked at the thought of any unnecessary medical procedure, any break in her skin that could let in infection. Instead, I said yes. We went to the mall and she picked out little silver studs shaped like stars. The piercing technician was probably wondering why I was crying over such a simple procedure. I was crying because my daughter was living a normal teenage life, making normal teenage decisions, worried about normal teenage things. The girl who couldn't breathe unfiltered air for the first 7 years of her life was now worried about whether her earrings matched her outfit. But here's what I learned from Emma's journey. The invisible prison isn't just about SCID. It isn't just about immune deficiency. We all live in invisible prisons of one kind or another. Some people are trapped by fear, too afraid to take risks or try new things. Some are trapped by other people's expectations, living lives that don't belong to them. Some are trapped by trauma, by past experiences that keep them locked in patterns that no longer serve them. Emma taught me that freedom isn't just about physical space. It's about the courage to keep fighting even when the odds are impossible. It's about maintaining hope when everything looks hopeless. It's about believing in possibilities even when the world tells you they don't exist. She taught me that some prisons are made of plastic walls and positive air pressure. But some prisons are made of our own fears, our own limiting beliefs, our own acceptance of less than what we deserve. The difference between Emma and most of us is that her prison was visible. She could see the walls, touch the barriers, understand exactly what was keeping her trapped. Most of us can't see our prisons. We think our limitations are just reality. We think our fears are just common sense. We think our isolation is just the way things have to be. But Emma proved that even the most impossible prisons can be escaped. Even the most dire diagnoses can be overcome. Even the most hopeless situations can turn around. Not always. Not for everyone. I know how lucky we were. I know that for every Emma there are children who don't make it, families who don't get their miracle, stories that don't end with playground laughter and star-shaped earrings. But Emma's story proves that miracles are possible, that hope is rational, that fighting for the impossible is sometimes the most logical thing you can do. Today, Emma is planning her high school course schedule. She wants to study medicine, maybe become a pediatric immunologist like Dr. Martinez. She wants to help other kids like she used to be. I want to tell them that being different doesn't mean being broken, she told me. I want to show them that being trapped doesn't mean being powerless. I want them to know that even if you start life in a bubble, you don't have to stay there forever. Last week, she came home from school with a permission slip for a field trip to the Science Museum. Just a normal field trip, the kind thousands of kids take every year. As I signed it, I thought about how extraordinary the ordinary had become for us. How miraculous it was that my daughter could climb on a school bus with 30 other kids, breathe their air, share their space, and come home healthy and happy. Emma looked over my shoulder as I signed the form. Remember when I used to watch other kids through the window and wonder what it would be like to be normal? I nodded. I don't want to be normal anymore, Mama. I want to be extraordinary. I want to use everything I learned in that room to help other people escape their rooms. That night, I stood in Emma's doorway and watched her sleep in her own bed, in her own room, breathing regular air, living a regular life that she had fought 7 years to earn. I thought about the 19-year-old college student in Oregon who decided to sign up for the bone marrow registry on a random Tuesday, never knowing that his bone marrow would save my daughter's life. I thought about all the doctors and nurses who cared for Emma when her survival seemed impossible. I thought about the researchers and scientists who developed the treatments that made her transplant possible. Emma's freedom didn't happen in isolation. It happened because of 1,000 invisible connections, a network of strangers who contributed to her miracle without ever knowing her name. Maybe that's the real lesson. Maybe we're all connected by invisible threads of possibility. Maybe the college student who saves a life, the doctor who refuses to give up, the parent who keeps hoping against hope, the child who keeps fighting when fighting seems pointless, are all part of the same story. Maybe the girl with no immune system was never really isolated at all. Maybe she was surrounded by love and hope and determination all along, even when she couldn't see it through the plastic walls. Maybe we all are. The invisible prison was real. The isolation was real. The fear was real, but so was the love. So was the hope. So was the community of people who refused to let Emma face her battle alone. And in the end, love won, hope won, community won. The invisible prison that seemed so permanent, so inescapable, so final, turned out to be temporary after all. Emma is living proof that no prison is permanent. No diagnosis is final. No situation is hopeless. Even when you're born with no immune system, in a world that's trying to kill you, surrounded by invisible barriers that separate you from everything you want, you can still find a way to break free. Sometimes it takes 7 years. Sometimes it takes a perfect stranger's bone marrow. Sometimes it takes a village of medical professionals and family members and friends who refuse to give up. But it's possible. Freedom is always possible, even from the most impossible circumstances. Emma is playing soccer this afternoon. Just a normal 8th grade soccer game on a normal Tuesday in October. She'll run and sweat and breathe hard and maybe get grass stains on her uniform, and she'll come home tired and happy and completely ordinary. And I'll be in the stands crying like I do at every game. Not because she's winning or losing, but because she's playing at all. Because 13 years ago, the doctors told us she might never leave her room. And now she's running free. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel. Like, share, and subscribe. Please write a comment what you think about this video.